The briefing room hummed with the low buzz of tactical radios and the shuffle of combat boots on concrete. 8 Navy SEALs clustered around the digital map display, their eyes tracking the red zones that marked enemy positions across the valley floor. The mission parameters were brutal. Extract a high-value target from a compound surrounded by hostiles. Get out clean. No room for error. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison traced the infiltration route with his finger. The valley stretched 12 kilometers from their insertion point to the target building, a concrete structure that intelligence had marked as heavily fortified. 3 escape routes led back to the extraction zone, but all of them cut through open terrain where enemy patrols moved in predictable patterns. Chief Petty Officer Danny Torres checked his weapon for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. His H&K 416 felt solid in his hands, familiar weight that brought comfort before missions like this. Around him, the rest of Alpha Team ran through their own pre-mission rituals. Equipment checks, comm tests, the quiet mental preparation that separated professional operators from weekend warriors. In the corner of the briefing room, Captain Sarah Chun sat at a folding table with a laptop and radio headset. Her flight suit bore the standard patches of an Air Force officer, but no combat decorations were visible. The SEALs had barely acknowledged her presence when they filed in 20 minutes earlier. She was logistics support, maybe coordination with higher command. Not their concern. Morrison pointed to the extraction coordinates. His voice carried the confidence of 15 years in special operations. 200 confirmed kills across 4 deployments had earned him respect from men who measured worth in completed missions and bullets fired in anger. The target building sits here, 3 stories reinforced concrete. Intelligence estimates 20 to 30 hostiles in the immediate area. We go in fast, grab the package, extract via helicopter at Grid 77 Alpha. Petty Officer First Class Rick Dalton adjusted his night vision mount and shook his head slightly. The whole op felt rushed, thrown together by desk officers who had never walked a patrol in hostile territory. Too many variables, too many things that could go wrong. In his experience, missions that looked simple on paper usually turned into disasters in the field. Torres glanced toward the woman in the corner. She had not spoken during the entire briefing, just typed notes on her laptop and monitored radio frequencies through her headset. Probably some intelligence liaison, making sure they followed proper procedures. The kind of officer who wrote reports about operations, but never participated in them directly. We have close air support on standby, Morrison continued, but the nearest Apache is 45 minutes out if things go sideways. Command wants this fast and quiet. No artillery, no heavy weapons unless absolutely necessary. We get in, complete the mission, get out before anyone knows we were there. The digital clock on the wall showed 0347 hours. Sunrise was still 3 hours away, giving them a narrow window of darkness to complete the operation. Morrison had run similar extractions in Afghanistan and Iraq, but this target sat in a valley that offered limited cover and multiple avenues for enemy reinforcement. Dalton checked his ammunition count and looked around the room. 8 operators, standard loadout, good intelligence on the target. The math should work in their favor, but combat had a way of making even simple equations complicated. He had learned to trust his instincts after 12 years of special operations, and something about this mission felt off. Captain Shin closed her laptop and stood up from the table. She moved with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to military environments, but the SEALs barely registered her movement. Their focus remained locked on the mission ahead, on the tactical problems that would determine whether they came home or became another classified casualty report. "What do you all call home when you are not deployed?" Shin asked quietly. The question seemed to come from nowhere, directed at no one in particular. Morrison looked up from the map display. "Texas mostly. Torres is from California." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about the people I am working with tonight," she replied. Her voice carried no particular emphasis, just professional interest in the team she would be supporting from a distance. Torres finished his equipment check and slung his rifle across his chest. The woman seemed friendly enough, but they had work to do. Real work that required focus and precision. Logistics officers could ask personal questions after the mission was complete and everyone was back at base safe. The briefing concluded with standard procedure reminders and communication protocols. Morrison assigned sectors of responsibility and backup plans for various contingencies. The SEALs filed out toward the armory to collect additional equipment and ammunition. Their boots echoed in the corridor as they prepared for another night of operations in enemy territory. Chen remained in the briefing room, checking frequencies on her radio and reviewing flight data on her laptop. The SEALs had their mission to focus on. She had hers as well, though none of them had asked what exactly that mission entailed. They would find out soon enough when the shooting started and everything went according to Murphy's Law instead of the careful plans drawn up in air-conditioned command centers. Outside, helicopter rotors began spinning up for the insertion flight. The mission clock had started running, and there would be no turning back once they crossed into hostile territory. The armory smelled of gun, oil, and metal polish. Alpha Team moved through their equipment checks with practiced efficiency, each operator responsible for weapons, ammunition, and specialized gear that could mean the difference between mission success and body bags. The overhead fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across rows of assault rifles, night vision devices, and tactical explosives. Morrison strapped extra magazines to his vest and tested his radio connection. The comm system crackled with routine traffic from other units across the base. Air traffic control coordinated helicopter movements. Logistics officers tracked supply convoys. Intelligence analysts updated threat assessments. Normal military background noise that would fade into silence once they crossed into enemy territory. Torres hefted his M249 squad automatic weapon and checked the belt feed mechanism. 200 rounds of 5.56 ammunition hung from his combat vest in linked belts that would provide sustained fire support if the mission turned into a running gun battle. He had carried the same weapon through 3 deployments, and the familiar weight brought confidence that statistics and briefing slides never could. Through the armory windows, they could see Captain Chun walking across the tarmac toward the flight line. Her stride looked purposeful, professional, but she was heading in the wrong direction for the command post where logistics officers usually spent their time during operations. Maybe she had paperwork to file or reports to transmit before the mission launched. Dalton loaded high explosive rounds into his M203 grenade launcher and secured them in his ammunition pouches. Each 40mm shell could clear a room or eliminate light vehicles, assuming they encountered targets that required that level of firepower. Command wanted this operation quiet, but combat rarely followed the preferences of people who plan missions from air-conditioned offices. "She seems nice enough," Petty Officer Mike Hassan commented as he adjusted his sniper scope. His M110 rifle would provide overwatch during the extraction, covering their movement from elevated positions around the target compound. The woman had asked about their home states like she actually cared about the answer, which was more personal interest than most support personnel ever showed. Torres shrugged and continued his equipment check. Nice did not matter when bullets started flying, and everything depended on training, experience, and the ability to make split-second decisions under pressure. The logistics officer seemed competent at her job, but her job would not involve getting shot at by people who wanted to kill Americans. Outside, the sound of jet engines began echoing across the base. Someone was running engine tests on the flight line, probably routine maintenance on the aircraft that provided close air support for ground operations. The high-pitched whine of turbofan engines mixed with the deeper rumble of helicopter rotors as various units prepared for night missions throughout the theater. Morrison finished his radio check and looked at his watch. They had 30 minutes before helicopter insertion, enough time to review the mission one more time and mentally rehearse the critical moments that would determine success or failure. The target compound sat in a valley that offered limited cover and multiple approaches for enemy reinforcement. Getting in would be the easy part. Hassan tested his night vision equipment and adjusted the focus until the armory appeared in sharp green detail. The advanced optics would give them a significant advantage during nighttime operations, But technology only worked when human operators made smart decisions about when and how to use it. He had seen too many missions fail because someone trusted gadgets more than training. The helicopter crews were probably running their own pre-flight checks, inspecting aircraft systems, and reviewing flight paths that would carry Alpha Team into hostile territory. Pilots faced their own risks during insertion and extraction operations, flying low and fast through areas where enemy forces carried surface-to-air missiles and heavy machine guns specifically designed to shoot down helicopters. Torres checked his medical kit and verified that each team member carried emergency supplies for treating gunshot wounds and shrapnel injuries. Combat medicine had evolved significantly over the past decade, but the basic principle remained unchanged. Keep wounded operators alive long enough to reach proper medical facilities. Every SEAL carried enough supplies to treat multiple casualties. "Wonder what kind of support we will actually get if things go bad," Dalton said quietly. He had worked with Air Force liaison officers before, and most of them understood ground operations about as well as infantrymen understood fighter aircraft. Good intentions did not always translate into effective close air support when people were shooting at you. Morrison secured his demolition charges and tested the electronic detonators. The explosive devices would breach doors or walls if the mission required forced entry, but using them would announce their presence to every hostile within 5 kilometers. Command preferred surgical precision over sledgehammer tactics, at least in theory. Through the windows, they could see maintenance crews working on aircraft under bright floodlights. The base operated around the clock, supporting multiple operations across different time zones and theaters of conflict. Ground crews serviced helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, and unmanned drones that provided intelligence, surveillance, and strike capabilities for units throughout the region. Hassan adjusted his rifle sling and checked his ammunition supply. 200 rounds of match-grade 7.62 ammunition would handle most situations that required precision shooting from distance. His rifle could engage targets effectively out to 800 meters, assuming clear sight lines and minimal environmental interference from wind or atmospheric conditions. The woman had seemed genuinely interested in their backgrounds, which was unusual for support personnel who typically focused on their own responsibilities rather than getting to know the operators they worked with. Most logistics officers treated SEALs like equipment to be moved from point A to point B rather than people with families and lives outside the military. Torres finished his final equipment check and shouldered his pack. 60 pounds of weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, and specialized gear that would sustain them through the mission and any unexpected complications that might arise. The weight felt familiar, distributed across his frame in a way that would not interfere with movement or combat effectiveness. Morrison gathered the team for a final briefing update. Intelligence had confirmed that the target remained in the compound, but enemy patrol patterns had shifted slightly since the morning reconnaissance flight. They would need to adjust their approach route to avoid detection during the infiltration phase of the operation. The mission clock continued, counting down toward insertion time. Once they boarded the helicopter, there would be no turning back until the operation concluded successfully or failed catastrophically. Every piece of equipment had been checked twice, every contingency planned for, every operator mentally prepared for whatever waited in the darkness ahead. The MH-60 Black Hawk lifted off at 0415 hours with minimal fanfare. Alpha Team sat in 2 rows facing each other across the helicopter's cargo compartment, their weapons secure between their knees and gear bags stowed behind their seats. The aircraft banked sharply to the right as it cleared the base perimeter, beginning the 40-minute flight to the drop zone 12 kilometers from the target compound. Morrison monitored tactical frequencies through his headset while reviewing digital maps on his tablet computer. The flight path would take them through 3 different air corridors, staying below radar coverage and avoiding known anti-aircraft positions that intelligence had identified over the past week. The helicopter crew had flown similar missions dozens of times, but each operation carried unique risks that could not be completely eliminated through planning. Torres stared out the small window at the landscape passing below them. Desert terrain stretched in all directions, broken by occasional roads and scattered buildings that showed no signs of life at this hour. The darkness would provide concealment during their insertion, but it would also hide enemy forces that might be moving through the same area with hostile intentions. The helicopter maintained radio silence, except for essential navigation updates with air traffic control. Electronic warfare specialists monitored enemy communications frequencies, listening for any indication that their aircraft had been detected or that ground forces were preparing to engage incoming helicopters. So far, the airwaves remained quiet. Hassan checked his sniper rifle one final time and verified that his scope covers were secure. The weapon would need to function perfectly once they reached the target area, providing overwatch and precision fire support if the mission encountered armed resistance. He had made similar flights countless times, but pre-mission anxiety never completely disappeared. Back at the forward operating base, Captain Chun completed her own pre-flight checklist in the cockpit of an A-10 Thunderbolt II. The twin-engine aircraft sat on the flight line under portable lights, its distinctive profile unmistakable even in the darkness. Ground crews had finished fueling and arming the aircraft 30 minutes earlier, loading the 30mm Gu-8 cannon with armor-piercing rounds and mounting precision-guided missiles on the wing pylons. She reviewed flight data on her cockpit displays and tested communication systems that would link her directly to ground forces operating in the target area. The A-10 had been designed specifically for close air support missions, built around the massive cannon that could destroy tanks and fortified positions with surgical precision. Most people saw the aircraft as slow and unglamly, but pilots knew it was nearly indestructible and absolutely lethal when properly employed. The helicopter carrying Alpha Team maintained its course through the mountain passes that provided natural concealment from enemy radar installations. The crew chief monitored engine performance and fuel consumption, while the pilots navigated using night vision equipment and GPS coordinates that had been programmed before takeoff. Flying at low altitude required constant attention to terrain features and weather conditions. Dalton reviewed his ammunition load and confirmed that his grenade launcher was properly secured. The 40mm high-explosive rounds could breach doors or eliminate enemy positions, but using them would announce their presence to anyone within hearing distance. Command preferred stealth over firepower, at least during the initial phases of the operation. The MH-60 began its descent toward the landing zone 10 minutes ahead of schedule. The pilots had encountered favorable winds that allowed them to maintain higher speeds without compromising fuel efficiency or operational security. They would have additional time for final equipment checks before beginning the ground phase of the mission. Chun started her engines and began the process of getting clearance for takeoff. Air traffic control coordinated her departure with other aircraft operating in the same airspace, ensuring separation distances that would prevent mid-air collisions or communication interference. The A-10 would remain on standby at a forward airfield, ready to respond if ground forces requested immediate air support. Morrison studied satellite imagery of the target compound and surrounding terrain. The building sat in a natural depression that provided some concealment, but also created potential choke points if they needed to extract under fire. 3 escape routes led back toward the pickup zone, but all of them crossed open ground where enemy forces could establish ambush positions. The helicopter approached the landing zone with navigation lights extinguished and engines muffled to reduce acoustic signature. The crew chief prepared to lower the rear ramp while the pilots maintained hover altitude just long enough for Alpha Team to disembark with their equipment. Speed would be essential to minimize exposure time for both the aircraft and the ground team. Torres felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded combat operations. Training could prepare operators for most situations they would encounter, but actual missions always contained variables that could not be predicted or controlled. Success depended on adaptability, teamwork, and the ability to make correct decisions under extreme pressure. Hassan secured his rifle and prepared for fast-rope insertion onto terrain that intelligence described as rocky and uneven. The landing zone offered concealment from enemy observation posts, but it also limited visibility for the SEALs as they established a defensive perimeter and began movement toward their objective. Night vision equipment would help, but technology could not replace human judgment. The MH-60 flared into landing position as the crew chief lowered the rear ramp. Alpha Team moved quickly down the ramp and spread into defensive positions around the helicopter while the pilots maintained power for immediate takeoff. The entire insertion process took less than 30 seconds before the aircraft lifted off and disappeared into the darkness. Dalton checked his compass heading and confirmed their position using GPS coordinates. The target compound lay 8 kilometers to the north through terrain that offered scattered cover but multiple opportunities for enemy forces to establish observation posts or ambush positions. They would move carefully, stopping frequently to listen for sounds that might indicate hostile activity. Morrison established communication with the helicopter crew and confirmed extraction timing for the return flight. The aircraft would remain on standby at a secure location, ready to return for pickup once the mission was complete. Backup extraction sites had been identified in case the primary landing zone became compromised by enemy action. Alpha Team moved through the darkness in tactical formation, each operator maintaining visual contact with the man ahead while scanning assigned sectors for enemy activity. The terrain proved more challenging than satellite imagery had suggested, with loose rocks and hidden gullies that forced them to adjust their routes several times during the approach to the target compound. Morrison raised his fist, signaling the team to halt. Through his night vision scope, he could see the concrete building that housed their objective, but something was wrong with the intelligence picture. Instead of the 20 to 30 hostiles that briefers had predicted, thermal imaging revealed at least 50 enemy fighters positioned around the compound in defensive positions. Torres moved up to Morrison's position and confirmed the count through his own optics. The enemy had reinforced the target area with additional personnel, possibly in response to increased American air activity over the past week. Machine gun positions covered all the obvious approach routes, and roving patrols moved in coordinated patterns that suggested professional military training rather than militia fighters. Hassan established overwatch from an elevated position 300 meters from the compound. His scope revealed enemy sentries equipped with night vision devices and communication equipment that allowed them to coordinate defensive fires across multiple positions. The tactical situation had deteriorated significantly from what mission planners had anticipated during the briefing phase. Dalton checked his ammunition load and reviewed the floor plans they had studied before insertion. The target remained inside the building, but extracting him would require fighting through prepared defensive positions held by enemy forces that outnumbered Alpha Team by more than 6-1. The math was not favorable for a direct assault. Morrison established communication with higher command and transmitted a situation report that included updated enemy strength estimates and defensive positioning. The response came back within minutes. Mission remains priority 1. Adapt and overcome. Reinforcements not available in your time window. Command wanted the target extracted regardless of tactical complications. The enemy had established interlocking fields of fire that would make movement across open ground extremely hazardous. Heavy machine guns covered the main approaches, while lighter weapons provided supporting fires from secondary positions. Mortar crews stood ready to engage any force that attempted to assault the compound directly. Torres identified at least 3 sniper positions that dominated the high ground around the target building. Enemy marksmen could engage Alpha Team from ranges that exceeded their ability to return effective fire with standard infantry weapons. They would need close air support to neutralize the defensive positions before attempting to reach the compound. Hassan transmitted target coordinates for the enemy positions to Morrison, who relayed the information to tactical air control. The nearest Apache attack helicopter remained 45 minutes away, assuming it could break free from supporting another operation that had encountered heavy resistance in a different sector. Dalton moved to a flanking position and confirmed that enemy forces had established blocking positions along all 3 planned escape routes. The defensive layout suggested that hostile commanders knew American forces were operating in the area, and had prepared specifically to counter a rescue attempt. Someone had compromised operational security. Morrison studied the tactical situation and realized that conventional assault tactics would result in unacceptable casualties without guaranteeing mission success. Alpha Team could probably fight their way into the compound, but getting back out with the target would require significant fire support that was not currently available. The enemy began adjusting their patrol patterns in response to movement they had detected in the surrounding terrain. Thermal imaging devices allowed them to track heat signatures even in complete darkness, giving them a technological advantage that American forces usually enjoyed against less sophisticated opponents. Torres monitored radio frequencies and intercepted enemy communications that confirmed their awareness of American presence in the area. Hostile commanders were coordinating reinforcements from nearby positions, potentially doubling their numerical advantage within the next 30 minutes. The tactical window was closing rapidly. Hassan maintained overwatch while the rest of Alpha Team evaluated their options. Direct assault remained possible, but would likely result in mission failure and multiple casualties. Withdrawal would preserve the team, but leave the target in enemy hands, which command had already indicated was unacceptable. Morrison contacted Tactical Air Control again and requested immediate, close air support from any available aircraft. The response confirmed that Apache helicopters were engaged elsewhere and fixed-wing aircraft were committed to supporting other ground operations. Alpha Team would need to hold their position until air support became available. Dalton identified a possible infiltration route that might allow 1 or 2 operators to reach the compound, while the rest of the team provided diversionary fires. The approach would require crossing 200 meters of open ground under direct observation from enemy positions, but it represented their best chance for mission success. The tactical situation continued to deteriorate as enemy forces established additional defensive positions and brought crew-served weapons into firing positions that covered all possible approach routes. Machine gun teams coordinated their fields of fire while mortar crews prepared to engage any concentration of American forces. Torres checked his ammunition supply and calculated how long Alpha Team could maintain effective fires against superior numbers of enemy fighters. Their combat load would sustain perhaps 15 minutes of intense firefight before they would need to withdraw or face being overrun by hostile forces advancing under covering fire. Hassan identified priority targets that would need to be eliminated before any assault could succeed. Enemy machine gun positions posed the greatest threat, followed by sniper teams and mortar crews that could bring indirect fires to bear on American positions. The target list exceeded their ability to engage simultaneously. Morrison transmitted another situation report to higher command and requested guidance on how to proceed given the changed tactical situation. The target remained mission-critical, but attempting extraction with current resources would likely result in team casualties without achieving the objective. The enemy began probing movements toward Alpha Team's position, testing their defensive preparations and attempting to identify exact locations and strength. Hostile commanders were preparing to transition from defensive operations to offensive action that would eliminate the American threat to their compound. Dalton prepared his grenade launcher and selected high-explosive rounds that could disrupt enemy positions if the situation required immediate defensive fires. The 40mm rounds would provide some capability against enemy positions, but sustained combat would require heavier weapons that Alpha Team did not possess. The first mortar round impacted 50 meters from Alpha Team's position, sending dirt and rock fragments whistling through the air above their heads. Morrison pressed himself against the rocky outcropping that provided their only cover while enemy spotters adjusted their fires for the next salvo. The hostile forces had located them and were beginning a coordinated assault. Torres returned suppressive fire with his M249, sending controlled bursts toward the machine gun position that had revealed itself by muzzling flashes. The enemy weapon fell silent temporarily, but 2 more heavy machine guns opened fire from different positions, creating interlocking fields that made movement impossible across the open ground between Alpha Team and the target compound. Hassan acquired targets through his sniper scope and began engaging enemy personnel who exposed themselves while maneuvering between defensive positions. His first shot eliminated a machine gunner at 400 meters, but the weapon was immediately replaced by another fighter who continued firing without interruption. The enemy had trained replacements for every critical position. Dalton launched a 40mm grenade toward a cluster of enemy fighters who were attempting to flank their position from the north. The high-explosive round detonated precisely on target, scattering the hostile force and buying Alpha Team a few minutes before the enemy could reorganize their assault. But ammunition for the grenade launcher was limited, and they were already consuming their combat load faster than planned. Morrison established communication with Tactical Air Control and transmitted an urgent request for immediate close air support. Any available aircraft, any weapon system, anything that could break up the enemy assault before Alpha Team was overrun by superior numbers. The response confirmed that all available helicopters remained committed to other operations for at least another 30 minutes. The second mortar salvo landed closer, with one round impacting less than 20 meters from their position. Shrapnel peppered the rocks around them while the enemy adjusted their fires based on observed impacts. The next salvo would likely score direct hits unless Alpha Team displaced to a different position, but moving would expose them to machine gun fires from multiple directions. Torres reloaded his weapon and checked his ammunition supply. 200 rounds had diminished to fewer than 100 after just 10 minutes of contact with enemy forces. At this rate of consumption, they would exhaust their combat load before reinforcements could arrive or extract them from the deteriorating tactical situation. Hassan continued engaging priority targets, but realized that enemy forces were advancing under covering fire from positions he could not effectively engage with his rifle. Hostile fighters moved in small groups between concealed positions, getting closer to Alpha Team's defensive perimeter with each tactical bound. The enemy was executing a coordinated assault with professional precision. Dalton identified enemy movement to their east and engaged with rifle fire while preparing another grenade for launch. The hostile force included at least a dozen fighters armed with assault rifles and rocket-propelled grenades that could eliminate Alpha Team's defensive position with direct hits. The tactical balance was shifting rapidly in favor of the enemy. Morrison attempted to contact the helicopter crew that had inserted them, but the aircraft remained at a secure location too distant to provide immediate extraction under fire. Flying into the target area while enemy forces controlled the high ground would expose the helicopter to surface-to-air missiles and heavy machine gun fire that could destroy the aircraft. The enemy mortar crew found their range with the third salvo. Rounds impacted within 10 meters of Alpha Team's position, showering them with rocks and metal fragments while the concussion from nearby explosions affected their hearing and coordination. They had perhaps minutes before the enemy achieved direct hits that would eliminate their defensive capability. Torres shifted his position and engaged enemy fighters who were advancing through a dry creek bed that provided concealment from direct observation. His machine gun fire forced them to seek cover, but other hostile elements continued moving closer from different directions. The enemy was executing a multi-axis assault designed to overwhelm their defensive fires. Hassan acquired an enemy sniper who had been engaging Alpha Team from an elevated position 800 meters to the south. His shot eliminated the target, but muzzle flash from his rifle revealed his position to other enemy marksmen who immediately began engaging his location with concentrated fires that forced him to displace. Dalton expended his remaining grenades against enemy positions that posed the most immediate threat to their defensive perimeter. Each 40mm round disrupted hostile movement temporarily, but the enemy adapted quickly by moving in smaller groups and using terrain features that provided better concealment from American observation and fires. Morrison transmitted another situation report to higher command and requested guidance on whether to attempt extraction or continue the mission despite overwhelming enemy resistance. The response emphasized mission priority, but provided no additional resources or tactical options that could change the balance of forces on the ground. The enemy assault intensified as hostile forces coordinated their fires and movement to compress Alpha Team into an increasingly smaller defensive area. Machine gun teams provided covering fire, while assault elements advanced using terrain features that limited American ability to engage them effectively at long range. Torres recognized that their tactical situation was approaching the point where organized resistance would become impossible. Enemy forces were advancing simultaneously from 3 directions, while mortar fires prevented them from displacing to alternative defensive positions. The mathematics of combat were working against them. Hassan engaged targets of opportunity, but realized that his rifle fire was having minimal impact on the overall tactical situation. Individual enemy casualties were being replaced immediately, while Alpha Team could not afford to lose a single operator without significantly degrading their defensive capability. Dalton conserved his remaining rifle ammunition while scanning for enemy movement that indicated preparation for a final assault. Hostile forces were consolidating their positions and coordinating fires in preparation for rushing Alpha Team's defensive perimeter under covering fire from multiple machine gun positions. Morrison checked his watch and calculated that they had been in contact with enemy forces for 18 minutes. At their current rate of ammunition consumption and given the intensity of hostile fires, Alpha Team could maintain effective resistance for perhaps another 15 minutes before their combat capability would be seriously degraded. The enemy mortar crew continued adjusting their fires while machine gun teams moved closer to positions where they could engage Alpha Team with direct fire at ranges where American small arms could not effectively respond. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly toward the point where extraction under fire would become their only option for survival. Radio silence settled over Alpha Team's position as Morrison made the tactical decision to cease non-essential communications. Enemy forces had demonstrated sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities, and continued radio transmissions would provide them with additional targeting information for their mortar crews. The team would maintain calm discipline until the tactical situation changed significantly. Hassan displaced to a secondary firing position as enemy marksmen concentrated their fires on his previous location. Rock chips and bullet fragments scattered around him while he low-crawled between boulder formations that provided minimal concealment from hostile observation. His movement drew immediate attention from multiple enemy positions. Torres conserved ammunition by engaging only targets that posed direct threats to their defensive perimeter. His machine gun had become a priority target for enemy forces, and sustained firing would reveal his position to hostile marksmen who were systematically eliminating American defensive positions through concentrated fires. Dalton monitored tactical frequencies and intercepted enemy communications that indicated additional hostile reinforcements were moving toward their position from staging areas to the north and east. The enemy commander was committing reserve forces to ensure complete destruction of the American team rather than simply forcing their withdrawal. Morrison checked his remaining ammunition and calculated that Alpha Team had perhaps 10 minutes of effective combat capability before their fires would be insufficient to maintain defensive integrity. Enemy forces were methodically reducing their options while avoiding unnecessary casualties among their own personnel through careful tactical movement. The enemy mortar crew adjusted their fires based on observed movement from Alpha Team's position. Each salvo landed closer to their defensive positions while hostile spotters refined targeting data through systematic observation of American responses to incoming rounds. The next adjustment would likely achieve direct hits. Hassan identified enemy movement toward their southern flank, but held his fire to avoid revealing his new position. Individual shots would have minimal impact on the overall tactical situation, and his rifle represented their only capability for engaging targets at extended range once the enemy closed to assault distance. Torres displaced his machine gun to an alternate firing position that provided better fields of fire toward the most likely enemy approach routes. The movement required exposing himself to hostile observation for several seconds, during which enemy marksmen engaged his position with concentrated rifle fire that forced him to seek immediate cover. Dalton prepared defensive grenades for close-range engagement while monitoring enemy movement through terrain features that provided concealment from direct observation. Hostile forces were advancing in small groups that made targeting difficult while maintaining coordination that indicated professional military training and experience. Morrison attempted brief communication with higher command, but received only static in response. Enemy electronic warfare systems were jamming American radio frequencies, while their own communications remained clear and coordinated. The technological advantage that American forces usually enjoyed had been neutralized by hostile capabilities. The tactical air control frequency remained active with traffic from other operations across the theater, but no aircraft were available for immediate response to Alpha Team situation. Multiple ground units were requesting close air support simultaneously, and available resources were insufficient to meet operational demands. Hassan engaged an enemy spotter who was directing mortar fires against their position. His shot eliminated the target, but immediately drew return fire from multiple positions as hostile marksmen triangulated his muzzle flash and concentrated their fires on his location. He displaced again under covering fire from Torres. Enemy forces continued their methodical advance, while maintaining coordinated fires that prevented Alpha Team from effectively engaging their movement. Machine gun teams provided overwatch while assault elements moved closer through terrain features that limited American observation and targeting capability. Dalton identified preparation for enemy assault as hostile forces consolidated in positions within 50 meters of Alpha Team's defensive perimeter. The enemy was transitioning from suppression to assault phase, coordinating their final attack to overwhelm American defensive fires through concentrated effort from multiple directions simultaneously. Morrison made the decision to break radio silence and transmit their situation to any station capable of providing immediate assistance. Standard communication protocols were irrelevant when facing imminent tactical defeat, and any available support was preferable to maintaining procedures that would not affect the outcome. Torres prepared to engage enemy assault forces with his remaining ammunition while accepting that his position would be overrun within minutes. Machine gun fire could disrupt the initial assault wave, but would be insufficient to prevent follow-on forces from reaching their defensive positions under covering fire. Hassan selected targets for his final shots, prioritizing enemy leaders and weapons specialists who were coordinating the assault. Individual marksman fires would not change the tactical outcome, but eliminating key personnel might create enough confusion to provide Alpha Team with brief opportunities for extraction. Dalton armed his remaining explosive devices for defensive use against enemy personnel who reached their position. Close-range combat would favor the larger enemy force, but properly employed demolitions could inflict significant casualties while providing Alpha Team with momentary tactical advantage. The enemy mortar crew prepared for final fires to suppress American defensive positions immediately before their assault forces advanced across open ground. Timing would be critical to prevent friendly fire casualties while maximizing suppressive effect against Alpha Team's remaining combat capability. Morrison established communication with tactical air control and prepared to transmit their final situation report. Higher command needed accurate information about Alpha Team's tactical situation regardless of whether immediate assistance was available. Other units could learn from their experience even if rescue was impossible. Enemy forces completed their final preparations for coordinated assault from 3 directions simultaneously. Machine gun teams moved to positions where they could provide direct fire support, while assault elements prepared to advance under covering fire, designed to overwhelm Alpha Team's defensive capability through concentrated application of superior numbers. Torres checked his weapon function and prepared for close-range combat as enemy forces positioned themselves for final assault. Training and experience would determine survival once hostile forces reached their defensive perimeter, but mathematics favored the larger enemy force regardless of individual skill levels. Hassan acquired final targets, while enemy marksmen concentrated their fires on Alpha Team's known positions. Muzzle flashes would reveal American positions to hostile observers, but effective resistance required engaging enemy assault forces despite the risks associated with revealing defensive positions. Dalton monitored enemy movement indicators that suggested imminent assault while preparing defensive measures for close-range combat. Enemy forces had achieved tactical superiority through superior numbers and coordinated fires, leaving Alpha Team with limited options for continued resistance or successful extraction under fire. Morrison keyed his radio as enemy forces prepared for their final assault. The transmission would reveal their exact position to hostile electronic warfare systems, but tactical security no longer mattered when facing imminent overrun by superior numbers. Command needed to know that Alpha Team had reached the end of their combat capability. All stations, this is Alpha 6. Current position, Grid 74 Delta. Enemy strength, approximately 100 personnel with crew-served weapons and indirect fire support. We are heavily outnumbered and taking effective fires from 3 directions. Request immediate extraction or close air support. Torres engaged the lead assault element with controlled bursts from his machine gun, while enemy forces advanced under covering fire from multiple positions. His remaining ammunition would sustain perhaps 2 more minutes of effective fire before the weapon became useless, except as a club. The enemy had calculated their assault timing to coincide with Alpha Team's ammunition exhaustion. Hassan acquired an enemy machine gunner who was providing covering fire for advancing assault troops. His shot eliminated the target, but 3 more machine guns immediately increased their rate of fire to compensate for the loss. The enemy had positioned redundant weapons specifically to prevent any single casualty from disrupting their assault coordination. Dalton prepared his final defensive grenades, while enemy assault forces moved within 30 meters of their position. Hand grenades would be effective against personnel in the open, but the enemy was advancing in small groups that limited the effectiveness of area weapons. Professional tactics that minimized their vulnerability to defensive fires. The tactical air control frequency crackled with Morrison's transmission as radio operators across the theater monitored emergency communications from units in contact. Other ground forces were simultaneously requesting close air support, creating competition for limited aviation resources that were already committed to supporting multiple operations. Enemy mortar rounds impacted directly on Alpha Team's position for the first time, showering them with rocks and metal fragments, while concussion effects temporarily disoriented their defensive coordination. The hostile fire direction center had finally achieved accurate targeting data through systematic adjustment of their fires over the past 20 minutes. Torres felt shrapnel tear through his left shoulder, but continued engaging enemy assault forces with his machine gun. Blood soaked through his uniform, while adrenaline masked the immediate pain of the wound. Stopping to treat the injury would allow enemy forces to advance unopposed across the remaining open ground. Hassan displaced again as enemy marksmen concentrated their fires on his muzzle flash. Rock chips scattered around his position while bullets ricocheted off stone surfaces with distinctive whining sounds that indicated extremely close misses. The enemy had identified him as their primary long-range threat and was dedicating multiple marksmen to his elimination. Dalton lobbed a defensive grenade toward enemy assault forces who had advanced to within 20 meters of their position. The explosion scattered the immediate threat, but did not prevent other hostile elements from continuing their advance from different directions. The enemy was executing textbook small unit tactics under fire. Morrison transmitted again as the tactical situation continued deteriorating rapidly. Alpha 6 to any station. We cannot hold current position. Enemy assault imminent. Request immediate assistance from any available asset. Coordinates follow. The radio response came from tactical air control with information that confirmed Alpha Team's worst tactical assessment. All available helicopters were engaged supporting other ground forces in heavy contact. Fixed-wing aircraft were committed to pre-planned missions against high-priority targets. No immediate aviation support was available for emergency extraction or close air support. Torres expended his final belt of machine gun ammunition against enemy assault forces who were now advancing across open ground in coordinated bounds. Individual rifle fire would be insufficient to stop a determined assault by superior numbers, but he continued engaging targets until his weapon fell silent with an empty chamber. Hassan acquired enemy assault troops through his rifle scope, but realized that individual precision fires would have minimal impact against multiple assault elements advancing simultaneously. He selected targets based on their apparent leadership roles, hoping to disrupt enemy coordination during the critical final moments of their attack. Dalton armed his remaining demolition charges for defensive use as enemy forces reached the edge of their defensive perimeter. Close-range explosives would inflict casualties among assault troops, but would also expose Alpha Team to blast effects in the confined space between rock formations that provided their only cover. Morrison made the final transmission that would inform higher command of Alpha Team's tactical situation. His voice remained calm despite the circumstances, professional military bearing maintained even when reporting mission failure to superior officers who could not provide assistance. Alpha 6 to higher. Mission status is critical. We are being overrun by superior enemy forces. Cannot complete primary objective. Cannot maintain defensive positions. We are done. Alpha Team is done. The words hung in the radio static for several seconds before tactical air control acknowledged the transmission. Multiple stations across the theater had monitored the emergency communication, but none could provide immediate assistance to change Alpha Team's tactical situation. Enemy assault forces reached Alpha Team's defensive perimeter and began engaging American positions with rifle fire and hand grenades from ranges measured in meters rather than hundreds of meters. Individual combat skills would determine survival as the engagement transitioned from tactical to personal level. Torres drew his sidearm and prepared for close-range combat, while applying pressure to his wounded shoulder with his free hand. Blood loss was becoming a factor in his combat effectiveness, but the immediate threat from enemy assault troops took priority over medical treatment. Hassan shifted to his secondary weapon as enemy forces closed to ranges where rifle fire became impractical. His pistol would be effective at close range, but ammunition was limited and multiple enemy personnel were advancing toward his position simultaneously. Dalton detonated his defensive charges as enemy assault troops attempted to breach their position. The explosions temporarily disrupted the enemy attack, but also announced to hostile commanders that Alpha Team's defensive capability was nearly exhausted. Follow-on assault waves would face minimal organized resistance. Morrison coordinated final defensive fires while accepting that Alpha Team had reached the limits of their combat capability. Training and experience had sustained them longer than mathematical calculations suggested, but superior enemy numbers and firepower had achieved their inevitable tactical conclusion. The enemy assault intensified as hostile forces recognized that American resistance was collapsing. Machine gun fire concentrated on Alpha Team's position, while assault troops advanced under covering fire designed to overwhelm their remaining defensive capability through sustained pressure from multiple directions. Torres engaged enemy personnel with his pistol while moving between defensive positions that provided minimal cover from hostile fires. His wounded shoulder limited his mobility and accuracy, but stopping would allow enemy forces to concentrate their assault on his teammates' positions. Hassan continued engaging targets of opportunity while enemy assault forces advanced to within 10 meters of his position. Individual marksmanship remained effective at close range, but the tactical situation had deteriorated beyond the point where small arms fire could influence the overall engagement outcome. The tactical frequency remained silent for 8 seconds after Morrison's final transmission. Alpha Team continued engaging enemy assault forces at close range, while radio operators across the theater processed the implications of a Navy SEAL team reporting mission failure. No station had immediate assets available to assist with extraction or fire support. Torres reloaded his pistol with his final magazine, while enemy forces consolidated their positions for the concluding phase of their assault. His wounded shoulder had stiffened from blood loss, limiting his mobility between defensive positions. The enemy was methodically eliminating Alpha teams remaining cover through concentrated small arms fire. Hassan engaged enemy personnel who were advancing through the rocky terrain that had provided Alpha teams only defensive advantage. His rifle ammunition was nearly exhausted, and transition to secondary weapons would significantly reduce his effective engagement range against hostile forces operating in coordinated small unit formations. Dalton monitored enemy movement while preparing his remaining explosive devices for final defensive use. Close-range detonations would inflict casualties among assault troops, but would also expose Alpha Team to blast effects that could incapacitate them during the critical moments when enemy forces overran their position. Morrison checked his ammunition status and calculated that Alpha Team had perhaps 3 minutes of organized resistance before their defensive capability would be completely degraded. Individual survival would depend on close-range combat skills rather than tactical coordination once enemy forces breached their defensive perimeter. Static filled the tactical frequency as various stations attempted to establish communication with units that might have aviation assets available for emergency response. The radio traffic indicated that multiple ground forces were simultaneously requesting close air support from resources that were already committed to supporting other operations. Then a female voice cut through the radio chatter with transmission clarity that indicated close proximity to Alpha Team's position. The voice was calm, professional, with a distinctive cadence of military aviation communications that suggested combat experience rather than training exercises. Alpha 6, this is Warthog. I have your position marked and am tracking multiple enemy contacts surrounding your location. 30 seconds to contact. Recommend you mark your position with infrared strobes and take cover immediately. Morrison looked up from his radio in confusion. No, A-10 aircraft had been scheduled for close air support in their operational area. The nearest Thunderbolt was supposed to be stationed at a forward airbase 45 minutes away by flight time. Yet the transmission indicated an aircraft was already overhead and preparing to engage. Torres pressed his infrared marker and activated the strobe that would identify Alpha Team's position to friendly aircraft equipped with appropriate sensors. The device would be invisible to enemy forces lacking night vision equipment, but would clearly mark their defensive perimeter for close air support operations. Hassan continued engaging enemy assault forces while scanning the sky for aircraft navigation lights or engine noise that would confirm the presence of close air support. The darkness revealed no visual indication of friendly aircraft, but the radio transmission had been clear and professional. Dalton activated his infrared strobe and took cover behind the largest rock formation available in their defensive area. A-10 aircraft carried 30mm cannons that could eliminate enemy personnel and equipment with devastating effectiveness, but friendly forces needed adequate protection from blast effects and flying debris. The female pilot's voice returned on the tactical frequency with updates that indicated real-time observation of the tactical situation. Her transmission included specific information about enemy positions and movement that could only come from direct overhead observation through advanced sensors. Alpha 6, I have visual on enemy machine gun positions at your 9 and 3 o'clock. Heavy concentration of personnel advancing from your north. Marking enemy positions now. Keep your heads down. Morrison realized that whoever was flying overhead had detailed knowledge of their tactical situation and was prepared to engage enemy forces with precision fires. The pilot's calm professionalism suggested combat experience rather than training scenario participation, but no A-10 had been assigned to their operation. Torres took cover as the sound of jet engines became audible overhead. The distinctive low-frequency rumble of turbofan engines indicated a twin-engine aircraft operating at low altitude, consistent with A-10 specifications for close air support missions in hostile airspace. Hassan identified the aircraft profile against the star background as an unmistakable A-10 Thunderbolt silhouette. The aircraft was configured for close air support with external stores visible on wing pylons, indicating a full combat load of precision-guided munitions and cannon ammunition. Dalton recognized the engine's sound signature from previous operations where A-10 aircraft had provided close air support for ground forces in contact with enemy personnel. The aircraft was positioning for attack runs against enemy positions while maintaining adequate separation from Alpha Team's defensive area. The pilot's voice transmitted targeting information that demonstrated detailed knowledge of close air support procedures and coordination with ground forces. Her communications followed standard protocols while adapting to the specific tactical situation that Alpha Team was facing. Alpha 6, confirm you are marked with infrared strobes and have taken cover. I am beginning attack runs against enemy positions. Danger close fires, repeat danger close. Estimate 30 seconds between runs. Morrison acknowledged the transmission while taking cover behind rock formations that would provide protection from blast effects. Danger close fires meant that weapons would be employed within safety distances normally considered too hazardous for friendly forces, but their tactical situation required accepting those risks. Torres felt the ground vibrate as the A-10's Gu-8 cannon engaged enemy machine gun positions with sustained bursts of 30mm armor-piercing rounds. The distinctive sound of the cannon firing was unmistakable, a deep, buzzing noise that lasted several seconds as hundreds of rounds impacted enemy positions. Hassan observed secondary explosions from enemy positions as 30mm rounds detonated ammunition and equipment. The cannon fire was precise and concentrated, eliminating specific threats without endangering Alpha Team's defensive positions through accurate target identification and weapon employment. Dalton watched enemy assault forces scatter as cannon fire disrupted their coordinated advance. Individual hostile personnel sought cover while their unit cohesion collapsed under the devastating effects of accurate, close air support delivered at precisely the critical moment. The female pilot's voice provided updates on enemy movement and coordination for follow-on attack runs. Her situational awareness and tactical communication indicated extensive experience with close air support operations in combat environments rather than training scenarios. Alpha 6, enemy assault has been disrupted. I am observing scattered personnel seeking cover. Preparing for second attack run against remaining positions. Maintain your cover and mark any new threats with laser designation if available. Morrison realized that their tactical situation had reversed completely within 60 seconds. Enemy forces that had been preparing to overrun Alpha Team's position were now seeking cover from devastating air attack delivered with surgical precision by a pilot whose identity and presence remained unexplained. Torres checked his wound and confirmed that bleeding had slowed sufficiently to allow continued combat operations. The immediate threat from enemy assault forces had been eliminated, but hostile personnel remained in the area and could reorganize for renewed attack if not completely neutralized. Hassan observed enemy personnel attempting to withdraw from their positions under continued air attack. Many hostile fighters had been eliminated by the initial cannon runs, while survivors were abandoning equipment and seeking escape routes that would take them away from the engagement area. Dalton monitored the tactical frequency as the female pilot coordinated with Alpha Team for battle damage assessment and follow-on operations. Her professional competence was evident in every transmission, but her presence overhead remained unexplained by their original mission planning. The A-10 banked sharply overhead as Captain Chun lined up for her second attack run. Through her targeting pod, she could see enemy personnel attempting to regroup behind rock formations that provided concealment from ground observation but remained vulnerable to overhead attack. Her first cannon run had eliminated 3 machine gun positions and scattered the coordinated assault, but at least 30 hostile fighters remained combat effective. Morrison established direct communication with the pilot, while Alpha Team maintained defensive positions among the rocks. The woman's voice remained calm and professional despite engaging enemy forces at danger-close range, where targeting errors could eliminate friendly forces along with hostile personnel. Warthog, this is Alpha 6. Can you confirm your mission authorization and coordination with Tactical Air Control? We were informed no close air support was available in our operational area. Chun adjusted her targeting display and selected precision-guided munitions for her next attack. The enemy had positioned heavy weapons in locations where cannon fire might cause collateral damage to Alpha Team's defensive positions. Guided rockets would provide surgical accuracy against specific targets while minimizing risk to friendly forces. Alpha 6. Authorization is emergency close air support for troops in contact. Mission approved by higher command based on your situation reports. I was monitoring tactical frequencies from forward airbase when your transmission indicated imminent overrun. Torres watched the aircraft maneuver overhead with practiced precision that indicated extensive combat experience. The pilot was employing tactical flying techniques designed to minimize exposure to enemy air defenses while maintaining accurate weapons delivery against ground targets. Professional competence that suggested regular combat operations rather than training exercises. Hassan observed enemy movement through his rifle scope while the aircraft positioned for follow-on attacks. Hostile forces were attempting to establish new defensive positions that would provide protection from air attack, but their movement patterns indicated confusion and loss of unit cohesion following the devastating initial cannon runs. Dalton monitored radio communications between the pilot and tactical air control as coordination was established for continued close air support operations. The pilot's tactical knowledge and communication skills demonstrated familiarity with complex airspace management and coordination with multiple ground units simultaneously. Chun engaged enemy positions with precision-guided rockets that eliminated crew-served weapons without endangering Alpha Team's defensive area. Each missile impacted exactly on target, destroying specific threats while avoiding collateral damage to nearby terrain features that provided concealment for friendly forces. Morrison realized that the pilot was demonstrating exceptional accuracy with weapons employment under extremely challenging conditions. Danger-close missions required precise navigation, target identification, and weapons delivery that exceeded normal close air support standards. Few pilots possessed the skills necessary for such operations. Torres observed secondary explosions from enemy ammunition storage areas that had been targeted by the guided missiles. The pilot had identified critical enemy assets through careful observation and eliminated them with surgical precision that disrupted hostile operations while conserving ammunition for continued engagement. Hassan noted that enemy forces were beginning to withdraw from their positions under continued air attack. The hostile unit was transitioning from offensive operations to survival mode as their tactical organization collapsed under devastating fires delivered with accuracy that prevented effective defensive response. Dalton checked his equipment and prepared for possible pursuit operations if enemy forces attempted organized withdrawal rather than complete dispersal. Alpha Team could transition from defensive to offensive operations if air support continued neutralizing enemy resistance and mobility. Chun transmitted tactical updates to Alpha Team while coordinating with other aircraft operating in adjacent airspace. Her situational awareness included friendly and enemy positions across multiple operational areas, indicating access to command-level intelligence that exceeded normal pilot briefing information. Alpha 6, I am observing enemy vehicle movement approximately 2 kilometers north of your position. Appears to be reinforcement convoy attempting to reach engagement area. Request permission to engage mobile targets before they can affect your tactical situation. Morrison looked toward Torres with surprise evident in his expression. The pilot was tracking enemy activity across an operational area much larger than Alpha Team's immediate vicinity. Her awareness suggested access to intelligence sources and sensor systems that exceeded standard close air support capabilities. Torres nodded his agreement while monitoring the tactical frequency for additional information about enemy reinforcements. If hostile forces were moving additional personnel and equipment toward their position, air interdiction would be essential to prevent Alpha Team from facing renewed assault by fresh enemy forces. Hassan established overwatch toward the north while the aircraft engaged enemy vehicles that posed potential threats to their extraction. Through his rifle scope, he could observe distant explosions as precision-guided munitions eliminated transportation assets before they could reach the engagement area. Dalton calculated that enemy reinforcements could have changed their tactical situation significantly if they had reached Alpha Team's position before being intercepted by air attack. The pilot's initiative in engaging threats beyond their immediate vicinity demonstrated tactical thinking that exceeded normal close air support procedures. Chun continued coordinating fires against enemy positions while maintaining constant communication with Alpha Team about their tactical situation and requirements for continued operations. Her ability to process multiple information sources simultaneously while delivering precise weapons effects indicated exceptional professional competence. Morrison transmitted coordinates for enemy positions that Alpha Team could observe through direct ground reconnaissance. The pilot acknowledged the target information and engaged each position with appropriate weapons based on target type and proximity to friendly forces. Torres watched enemy personnel attempting to signal surrender as organized resistance collapsed under sustained air attack. The hostile force had transitioned from coordinated assault to individual survival as unit cohesion disintegrated under devastating fires delivered with surgical precision. Hassan observed that enemy casualties included leadership personnel who had been specifically targeted by precision weapons. The pilot had identified command and control elements through careful observation and eliminated them with guided munitions that disrupted enemy coordination more effectively than random area fires. Dalton monitored communications as the pilot coordinated with tactical air control for ammunition resupply and continued operations. Her conversation with air traffic controllers indicated access to priority support that suggested higher command authorization for extended close air support operations. Chun transmitted battle damage assessment requests to Alpha Team while continuing to track enemy movement through advanced sensor systems. Her tactical picture included detailed information about hostile casualties, equipment destruction, and remaining threats that could affect extraction operations. Alpha 6, I am showing minimal enemy movement in your immediate area. Recommend you prepare for extraction while I maintain overwatch for any remaining threats. Helicopter support is inbound to your position with estimated arrival in 15 minutes. Morrison realized that the pilot had been coordinating extraction support while simultaneously engaging enemy forces. Her ability to manage multiple tactical requirements indicated command-level situational awareness and authority that exceeded normal pilot responsibilities during close air support operations. Torres checked his wounded shoulder and confirmed that he could move effectively during extraction operations. The immediate threat from enemy assault had been eliminated through devastating air support delivered with precision that had saved Alpha Team from tactical defeat and probable casualties. Hassan prepared his equipment for rapid movement to the extraction landing zone while maintaining observation for enemy activity that might threaten helicopter operations. The pilot's continued overwatch would provide security during the vulnerable extraction phase, when Alpha Team would be exposed during movement to pick up coordinates. Dalton gathered sensitive equipment and prepared demolition charges to deny enemy forces access to American technology if extraction operations were delayed or compromised. Standard procedure required destroying classified materials rather than allowing them to be captured by hostile forces. The extraction helicopter appeared on the horizon exactly 15 minutes after Chen's transmission, but enemy forces had prepared one final attempt to prevent Alpha Team's escape. Hidden anti-aircraft positions revealed themselves as the MH-60 approached the landing zone, launching surface-to-arm missiles that forced the helicopter to break off its approach and seek cover behind terrain features. Morrison watched the helicopter disappear behind a ridgeline, while missile contrails dissipated in the night air. Two SA 7 shoulder-fired missiles had barely missed the aircraft, indicating that enemy forces retained significant air defense capability despite the devastating attack runs that had eliminated most of their personnel and equipment. Warthog, this is Alpha 6. Extraction Bird is taking missile fire from concealed positions. Can you locate and engage air defense threats? Our ride cannot land until those positions are neutralized. Chun banked her A-10 into a steep diving turn that brought her directly over the suspected missile launch sites. Through her targeting pod, she could see enemy personnel reloading portable air defense systems while others prepared backup missiles from concealed storage locations among the rocky terrain. Alpha 6, I have visual on 3 air defense positions. 2 confirmed SA-7 teams with additional missiles available. Third position appears to be heavy machine gun with anti-aircraft capability. Engaging now with cannon fire. Recommend your birds stay clear for 90 seconds. Torres observed the A-10 diving at an angle that seemed impossibly steep for safe weapons delivery. The aircraft approached the enemy positions at high speed while maintaining precise control that indicated exceptional piloting skills. Few aviators would attempt such aggressive attack profiles against air defense targets. Hassan tracked the aircraft through his rifle scope as Chun lined up for cannon runs that would require threading her flight path between terrain features that provided minimal clearance for safe maneuvering. The mountains created narrow corridors where targeting errors or flight control problems could result in controlled flight into terrain. Dalton counted the seconds as the Gu-8 cannon engaged enemy air defense positions with sustained bursts that lasted nearly 4 seconds each. The 30mm rounds impacted with devastating accuracy, eliminating missile teams and destroying their equipment through precise targeting that avoided collateral damage to surrounding terrain. Morrison watched secondary explosions bloom among the rocks as enemy ammunition detonated under cannon fire. The pilot was engaging multiple targets during single attack runs, transitioning between air defense positions with flight maneuvers that demonstrated mastery of close air support tactics under extreme conditions. Chin pulled out of her diving attack and immediately rolled into position for follow-on runs against remaining threats. Her aircraft control remained precise despite forces that would incapacitate pilots lacking extensive tactical flying experience. Each maneuver was calculated to maximize weapons effectiveness while minimizing exposure to remaining enemy fires. Torres felt the ground shake as 30mm rounds impacted less than 200 meters from Alpha Team's position. The pilot was delivering fires within danger-close parameters that required extraordinary accuracy to avoid friendly fire casualties. Her weapons employment demonstrated confidence in targeting systems and piloting skills. Hassan observed enemy personnel abandoning their air defense positions as sustained cannon fire eliminated their equipment and fighting positions. The hostile forces had realized that remaining in position meant certain death against an opponent who could deliver precision fires from multiple attack angles. Dalton monitored tactical communications as Chun coordinated with the extraction helicopter for renewed approach to the landing zone. Her transmissions included detailed information about remaining threats and optimal approach routes that would minimize exposure to any surviving enemy capabilities. Alpha 6 air defense threats have been neutralized. I am observing scattered enemy personnel withdrawing from the area. Extraction Bird is cleared for approach from the southeast. Landing zone is secure for immediate pickup. Morrison acknowledged the transmission while preparing Alpha Team for rapid movement to the extraction coordinates. The pilot's tactical flying and weapons delivery had eliminated threats that could have prevented their evacuation, demonstrating combat skills that exceeded anything he had witnessed during 15 years of special operations. Torres gathered his equipment despite his wounded shoulder while watching the A-10 establish overhead protection for extraction operations. The aircraft maintained constant movement patterns that provided observation of potential threats while remaining ready to engage any enemy forces that might interfere with helicopter operations. Hassan provided overwatch as Alpha Team moved toward the landing zone under protection of continuous air cover. The pilot's presence overhead provided security that allowed them to move rapidly across open terrain without concern for enemy ambush or interference with extraction procedures. Dalton observed the helicopter approaching from the southeast along the route that Chun had recommended for minimal exposure to potential threats. The pilot's tactical knowledge included detailed understanding of helicopter vulnerabilities and optimal procedures for extraction under fire. Chun transmitted updates on enemy activity while maintaining overwatch position that provided observation of the entire operational area. Her situational awareness included friendly and hostile positions, helicopter approach routes, and potential threats that could develop during extraction operations. Alpha 6, your ride is 2 minutes out. I am maintaining overwatch and have no enemy activity visible in the extraction area. Recommend you pop smoke for positive identification of your position during helicopter approach. Morrison deployed colored smoke to mark Alpha Team's exact location for the helicopter crew, while Chun continued providing security from overhead. The coordination between air and ground forces demonstrated professional competence that indicated extensive experience with complex extraction operations under hostile conditions. Torres limped toward the landing zone, while the A-10 flew protective circles overhead. The pilot's ability to coordinate multiple aspects of the extraction while maintaining tactical flying and weapons readiness exceeded normal close air support capabilities. Her performance indicated specialized training and combat experience. Hassan established security facing outward from the landing zone while monitoring the aircraft overhead. Chen's flight patterns provided optimal observation angles for detecting enemy activity while maintaining position for immediate weapons engagement if threats developed during the vulnerable extraction phase. Dalton prepared to board the helicopter as the MH-60 approached under protection of devastating air cover that had eliminated organized enemy resistance. The pilot's weapons employment and tactical flying had transformed their tactical situation from imminent defeat to successful extraction within 30 minutes. The helicopter flared into landing position as Chun transmitted final coordination for extraction completion. Her voice remained calm and professional despite conducting complex close air support operations that had required exceptional piloting skills and tactical decision-making under extreme pressure. Alpha 6, your bird is on deck. I will maintain overwatch until you are airborne and clear of the operational area. Outstanding work down there. Warthog out. Morrison led Alpha Team aboard the helicopter while realizing that the woman they had dismissed as logistic support had demonstrated combat flying skills that surpassed most pilots he had worked with during his career. Her performance had been absolutely flawless under conditions that would challenge the most experienced aviators. Torres secured his equipment as the helicopter lifted off under continued protection from the A-10 overhead. The pilot who had asked about their home states during the mission briefing had saved their lives through exceptional professional competence that none of them had suspected she possessed. Hassan looked up at the A-10 maintaining protective formation with their helicopter and understood that they had completely misjudged the capabilities of the woman who had introduced herself simply as logistics coordination. Her combat performance indicated elite pilot status and extensive operational experience. Dalton realized that the quiet Air Force officer who had seemed unimportant during their mission planning had possessed exactly the skills necessary to save Alpha Team when conventional support was unavailable. Her presence had been the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The MH-60 climbed steadily away from the extraction zone, while Alpha Team processed what they had witnessed during the past 30 minutes. Morrison stared out the helicopter window at the A-10 maintaining protective formation alongside their aircraft, realizing that his 15 years of combat experience had not prepared him to recognize elite pilot capabilities disguised as routine logistic support. Torres applied pressure to his wounded shoulder while watching the Thunderbolt through the crew chief's window. The woman who had quietly asked about their home states during mission planning had just demonstrated flying skills that exceeded anything he had seen during multiple deployments. Her weapons delivery under impossible conditions had saved their lives. Hassan checked his equipment while the helicopter gained altitude under continued air cover from Chen's aircraft. The pilot had engaged enemy air defenses with attack profiles that would challenge the most experienced aviators. Yet her voice had remained calm throughout radio transmissions that coordinated multiple complex operations simultaneously. Dalton looked toward Morrison and shook his head slowly. The logistics coordinator, who had seemed unimportant during their briefing, had possessed exactly the combat skills necessary to reverse their tactical situation when conventional support was unavailable. None of them had suspected her true capabilities. Morrison keyed his radio to establish communication with Chen's aircraft as the formation continued toward friendly airspace. Professional courtesy required acknowledging the exceptional performance that had prevented Alpha Team from becoming casualties rather than successful operators returning from a completed mission. Warthog, this is Alpha 6. Request permission for direct communication regarding your outstanding performance during our extraction. Your tactical flying and weapons employment exceeded anything we have experienced during our operational careers. Chen's response came immediately through the tactical frequency with the same calm professionalism she had maintained throughout the engagement. Her voice carried no indication that she considered her performance exceptional rather than routine execution of standard close air support procedures. Alpha 6, appreciate the feedback. Standard close air support mission parameters. Glad I could assist with your tactical situation. Safe flight back to base. Torres looked at Hassan with an expression that conveyed disbelief at Chen's casual dismissal of her extraordinary performance. The woman had just executed combat flying that would earn commendations for exceptional heroism, yet she described it as standard operating procedure. Hassan shook his head while monitoring the A-10's flight profile through the helicopter window. Chen was maintaining formation discipline that indicated extensive experience with complex air operations while simultaneously monitoring tactical frequencies for other units that might require immediate assistance. Dalton realized that Chen's performance had revealed professional competence that none of them had recognized during their initial assessment. Her quiet presence during the mission briefing had concealed capabilities that exceeded most pilots in the Air Force inventory of combat aviators. Morrison transmitted again, determined to acknowledge performance that had saved Alpha Team from tactical defeat and probable casualties. His military experience had taught him to recognize exceptional competence when he encountered it, regardless of initial impressions or circumstances. Warthog, negative on standard procedures. Your weapons delivery under danger close conditions and tactical flying against air defenses exceeded normal close air support parameters. Alpha Team owes you our lives. The radio remained silent for several seconds before Chen responded with professional acknowledgement that maintained her modest assessment of performance that had clearly exceeded normal operational standards. Her tone suggested that exceptional flying was routine rather than extraordinary effort. Alpha 6, mission accomplishment is always the priority. Protecting ground forces is what we do. No special recognition required. Torres exchanged looks with the other team members while realizing that Chen's attitude represented the mindset of elite operators who considered extraordinary performance to be normal expectations rather than exceptional achievement. Her standards exceeded those of most military aviators. Hassan observed the A-10's flight characteristics and recognized tactical maneuvering that indicated constant readiness for immediate weapons engagement if threats developed during their return flight. Chen was maintaining combat alertness throughout extraction operations rather than relaxing after mission completion. Dalton monitored tactical communications and noted that Chen was simultaneously coordinating with air traffic control while tracking other ground operations that might require close air support. Her situational awareness extended beyond Alpha Team's immediate requirements to theater-wide operational responsibilities. Morrison attempted one final transmission to establish personal connection with the pilot whose intervention had transformed their tactical situation from imminent failure to successful mission completion. Professional relationships between air and ground forces required mutual respect based on demonstrated competence. Warthog, Alpha 6 requests your actual name for our after-action reports. Your performance deserves proper recognition through official channels. Chen's response included information that explained her presence in their operational area and access to intelligence sources that had enabled her rapid response to Alpha Team's emergency situation. Her background exceeded their initial assessment of her role and responsibilities. Alpha 6, Captain Sarah Chun, call sign Warthog. I was monitoring tactical frequencies from forward airbase when your situation developed. Close air support is my primary mission specialty. Torres realized that Chen's identification as close air support specialist explained her exceptional performance under conditions that would challenge pilots lacking specific training and experience in ground support operations. Her skills represented specialized expertise rather than general aviation competence. Hassan understood that Chen's calm professionalism throughout the engagement reflected extensive combat experience rather than training exercise participation. Her tactical decisions and weapons employment indicated multiple deployments in support of ground operations under hostile conditions. Dalton calculated that Chen's response time from initial transmission to overhead arrival had required immediate takeoff from forward positions without lengthy mission planning or coordination delays. Her rapid response indicated prepositioned assets and authority to engage without higher approval. Morrison acknowledged Chen's identification while recognizing that her call sign reflected her aircraft type rather than personal designation. The A-10 community used Warthog as standard identification, but her individual performance had distinguished her from routine close air support operations. Captain Chun, Alpha 6 copies your identification. Your rapid response and tactical employment probably prevented Alpha Team casualties. We will ensure your performance receives appropriate recognition through command channels. The helicopter continued toward their base while Chen's A-10 maintained protective formation that provided security throughout their return flight. Her continued presence demonstrated professional responsibility that extended beyond immediate mission requirements to comprehensive support for ground operations. Torres checked his medical condition while watching the Thunderbolt through the aircraft window. His wounded shoulder would require treatment upon return to base, but Chen's intervention had prevented injuries that could have been fatal if enemy assault forces had overrun their defensive positions. Hassan secured his equipment while appreciating the transformation in their tactical situation that had resulted from Chen's unexpected capabilities. Alpha Team had gone from reporting mission failure to successful extraction within 30 minutes of her arrival overhead. Dalton prepared for arrival at their base, while recognizing that their initial assessment of personnel assignments had been completely incorrect. The woman they had dismissed as unimportant logistic support had possessed exactly the combat skills necessary for mission success. Morrison established communication with their base operations center to report mission status and request medical support for Torres upon arrival. His transmission would include recognition of Chen's exceptional performance that had enabled Alpha Team's successful return rather than casualty evacuation. The helicopter touched down at their forward operating base as dawn broke over the horizon, painting the flight line in shades of amber and gold. Alpha Team disembarked with equipment that bore the scars of sustained combat, while medical personnel moved forward to assess Torres's shoulder wound. The routine sounds of base operations resumed around them, but nothing felt quite the same after experiencing Chen's extraordinary intervention. Morrison walked across the tarmac toward the A-10 that was taxiing toward its parking position after completing post-flight procedures. The aircraft showed no visible damage despite engaging enemy forces at danger-close range under conditions that would challenge the most experienced combat pilots. Chen's flying had been absolutely flawless throughout operations that exceeded normal close air support parameters. Torres waited for medical evaluation while watching ground crews prepare to service Chen's aircraft. The Thunderbolt carried empty missile rails and reduced cannon ammunition that provided physical evidence of the devastating fires she had delivered with surgical precision. Her weapons employment had eliminated organized enemy resistance within minutes of arriving overhead. Hassan secured his rifle while observing Chen's aircraft configuration during her approach to the flight line. External fuel tanks and advanced targeting pods indicated capabilities that exceeded standard close air support specifications. Her A-10 was configured for extended operations with precision weapons that required specialized training and certification. Dalton completed his equipment inventory while realizing that their initial briefing had failed to identify the most critical asset available for their mission. Chen's presence and capabilities had been disguised as routine logistic support when she actually represented elite aviation resources that could determine mission success or failure. Chen shut down her engines and began post-flight procedures while ground crews positioned maintenance equipment around her aircraft. Her routine was methodical and professional, following standard protocols that concealed the extraordinary performance she had demonstrated during the previous 2 hours of combat operations. Morrison approached Chen's aircraft as she climbed down from the cockpit wearing standard flight gear that revealed no special insignia or decorations indicating her exceptional capabilities. Her appearance remained unremarkable despite having just completed flying that would earn recognition for outstanding heroism under fire. Captain Chun, Lieutenant Commander Morrison, Alpha Team Leader, I wanted to personally thank you for your performance tonight. Your intervention saved American lives and enabled mission completion when conventional support was unavailable. Chun secured her helmet and flight equipment while responding with professional courtesy that maintained her modest assessment of performance that had clearly exceeded normal operational expectations. Her demeanor suggested that exceptional flying was routine rather than extraordinary achievement requiring special recognition. Commander Morrison, glad I could assist. Close air support is what we do. Alpha Team's tactical skills enabled successful extraction once air threats were neutralized. Team effort throughout. Torres approached despite his injured shoulder while medical personnel prepared to transport him for proper treatment. His respect for Chen's capabilities had been earned through demonstrated performance under conditions where mistakes would have resulted in friendly casualties rather than mission success. Captain Chun, Petty Officer Torres, your flying tonight was unlike anything I have experienced during 3 deployments. The precision of your weapons delivery under danger-close conditions exceeded what I thought was possible with fixed-wing aircraft. Chun acknowledged Torres's recognition while maintaining focus on post-flight responsibilities that included coordinating with maintenance personnel and completing mission reports that would document her exceptional performance for higher command review and potential recognition through official channels. Petty Officer Torres, appreciate the feedback. A-10 aircraft are designed specifically for close air support missions. Training and equipment enable precision fires when ground forces require immediate assistance. Standard capabilities properly employed. Hassan joined the group while recognizing that Chen's professional modesty reflected the attitude of elite operators who considered extraordinary performance to be normal expectations rather than exceptional achievement. Her standards represented the highest levels of military aviation competence. Captain Chun, Petty Officer Hassan, your tactical awareness during our extraction exceeded normal pilot capabilities. You were coordinating multiple operations while delivering precision fires and maintaining constant situational awareness across the entire operational area. Chun completed her initial post-flight checklist while responding to recognition that acknowledged capabilities she clearly possessed but did not consider unusual or worthy of special attention. Her professional competence included skills that exceeded most aviators in the close air support community. Petty Officer Hassan, situational awareness is essential for effective close air support. Ground forces depend on accurate tactical picture and appropriate weapons employment. Communication and coordination are basic requirements for successful operations. Dalton approached with equipment that had been damaged by enemy fires during their defensive action before Chen's arrival. Shrapnel marks and bullet impacts provided physical evidence of the tactical situation that had required her exceptional intervention to prevent mission failure and probable casualties. Captain Chun, Petty Officer Dalton. Your response time from our initial transmission to overhead arrival indicated prepositioned assets and authority to engage without lengthy coordination delays. That rapid response prevented our tactical situation from becoming unrecoverable. Chun reviewed flight data on her kneeboard while acknowledging Dalton's observation about response procedures that enabled immediate support for ground forces in contact. Her operational authority included capabilities that exceeded normal pilot responsibilities during emergency situations. Petty Officer Dalton. Monitoring tactical frequencies enables rapid response when ground forces require immediate assistance. Forward positioning and mission authorization allow engagement without coordination delays that could compromise time-sensitive operations. Morrison gathered Alpha Team around Chun while recognizing that their initial assessment of personnel assignments had been completely incorrect. The woman they had dismissed during mission planning had possessed exactly the combat skills necessary to transform tactical defeat into operational success. Captain Chun, Alpha Team wants you to know that your performance tonight will be documented in our after-action reports with recommendations for appropriate recognition. Your flying and tactical decision-making saved American lives under extraordinary conditions. Chen secured her flight equipment while preparing to attend mission debriefing sessions that would review her performance and coordination with ground forces during complex close air support operations. Her professional routine continued despite having completed exceptional flying that exceeded normal operational standards. Commander Morrison, mission accomplishment is always the priority. Alpha Team's tactical competence enabled successful extraction once air support neutralized enemy threats. Professional cooperation between air and ground forces produces successful outcomes. Torres extended his uninjured hand to Chun while medical personnel waited to transport him for treatment. His gesture represented respect earned through demonstrated capability under conditions where performance directly affected American lives and mission success. Captain Chun, Alpha Team owes you our lives. We misjudged your capabilities during our initial briefing, but your performance tonight earned our complete respect and recognition as an elite combat pilot. Chun shook hands with each team member while maintaining professional courtesy that acknowledged their recognition without accepting credit that she considered inappropriate for routine execution of assigned responsibilities. Her attitude reflected dedication to mission success rather than personal recognition. Alpha Team, professional competence is what we do. Tonight's mission required coordination between air and ground forces to achieve successful outcomes. Team effort enabled mission completion when individual capabilities were insufficient. What moment in this story resonated most with you as these warriors discovered that assumptions can be completely wrong about the people around us? Morrison asked while Alpha Team prepared to depart for debriefing and medical treatment. Hassan looked back at Chin's aircraft while understanding that their experience had provided lessons about recognizing professional competence regardless of initial impressions or apparent role assignments. Elite capabilities often remain concealed until circumstances require their application for mission success. Chun completed her post-flight procedures while ground crews began servicing her aircraft for continued operations. Her routine remained unchanged despite having completed flying that would be remembered by Alpha Team as exceptional performance that demonstrated the highest standards of military aviation under combat conditions. The dawn light reflected off her aircraft's distinctive profile as Alpha Team departed for debriefing sessions that would document their mission and Chin's extraordinary intervention. Their respect had been earned through demonstrated capability when their lives depended on professional competence rather than initial assumptions about roles and responsibilities.